Hey everyone, glad to be here today for Vision 2022, and here today to talk about what I believe are the keys to consistent user experience, operations, and predictable costs. So, gonna jump into my slides here. Any questions along the way, please post them in the chat. I'll try and get to them at the end if I can, or if I can't, I can always follow up with you after. And yeah, so why don't we dive in? And you know, quick thing about me, not going to read it all. My name's Paul Morrissey. I'm a solution architect with Login BSI. I've actually been on the customer side probably about approximately 20 years. End user computing, virtualization, ops engineering, help desk, app V packaging, architecture, and most recently I was a service owner for a virtual desktop and hosted application remote access service at a financial institution, and yeah, so very technical, throughout my career, and then kind of moved in more into the business side of the world as my career progressed, and kind of saw a different lens on the world of VDI and DaaS and application hosting. So why don't we jump into my slides? Enough about me. And I'm going to start out with what I kind of see as pretty typical planning strategy for typical DaaS, VDI, and hosted app capacity planning. I think most times when projects spin up or when you're looking to expand your service, first thing we kind of do is we reach out to our trusted vendors, consultants that we know, to looking for sizing, capacity, understanding, how many can I run on this, how many VDIs, how many DaaS instances or apps I can run on a certain type of hardware or instance in Azure, right? We look to our blogs and community sharing. People smarter than me is kind of what I refer to them as. And I've been lucky my whole career. That those are resources I've used. Lots of great resources in the industry. EUC industry is excellent for community sharing. I used to be a CUGC leader, so we also look at vanilla baselines provided by our vendors, right? A lot of times the baselines provided using Login Enterprise. Used to be lots of simple rules around user to core ratios, VDI to core, vCPU to core. Those are things I've used in my career as well. And were helpful at that time. And EUC calculators. I think there's a lot of free ones. Even vendors have them. You just kind of punch in your information, and it outputs a nice clean. You need this much compute. You need this much storage. This much memory. And it makes it for a great starting point, but may not tell the whole story. The other thing I find, and this is in my experience, typically when we are doing these app capacity or VDI capacity planning, the biggest thing probably missing from the discussion is user experience. When you're planning your DaaS, VDI, or hosted app environment, I think the measuring that end user experience is really an afterthought many times. We assume it's going to be good because we're betting the farm kind of, on this strategy. We're buying this instance, we're buying this hardware. So we assume that the user experience is going to be of high quality, right? And in the beginning, it typically is. You have your project team, your sponsors, maybe some leaders. You put them all on this new multi-million-dollar hardware. User experience out of the gate is excellent, right? But over time, as you start to scale and load increases, we may start to see some user experience issues, right? So, and that's kind of where I kind of see a typical planning process where we start. And why don't we jump into the next slide? And as I kind of said, I really believe they're actually excellent starting points. Don't mean to be negative at all, and not everything is doom and gloom. I think all of these resources are what I would consider excellent starting points, but they do come with some risks, I think, right? If you just plainly follow, vanilla baselines and that information, right? There's a lot of amazing partners and vendors out there and content creators. They've really helped me my entire career. Working through planning strategies. How do we scale? How do we get high quality user experience? And I really do believe they're providing value. But I think the challenge for all of us, even those vendors and partners and our teams, is we don't know our organization's unique resource footprint. When Microsoft 365 is really combined with your apps, your agents, your security tools, your policies, they really aggregate together to create, your enterprise EUC workspace resource footprint. And once you apply that resource footprint on your infrastructure, on premise or in cloud, no one really knows the outcome, right? Until we try it, we apply pressure and start to scale, right? And so, as I said, some great starting points, but what are the risks, right? These are just my observations. I think you can, one of the biggest risk is unpredictable end user experience as you scale. I put in scale shock, not a real thing. I just put it in there. And really, what I'm saying here is, if you don't know what your operational capacity is or operational maximum capacity, you may assume the original design information in your original design document may be a true number, but if it's never been tested, as you start to scale, you may experience user experience issues and kind of hit a early, early user experience impact as you're scaling, and kind of call it scale shock, right? Best effort basis around your operational model. Again, if you're referring back to your original design document, but you've never actually scaled or applied pressure to that system, your resource to host ratio, um, is a best effort basis, right? Is the way I look at it. You may have inconsistent TCOs, your OpEx and CapEx. Now, typically for the technical guys, they don't really care. Not my problem, right? The TCOs and OpEx and CapEx. As someone who was on the technical side of the house for many years and was moved into a role where I sat between technical, business, finance, and leadership, it became important to me. And as I said, I had a really different lens on the world, and all the technical information really feeds up into those TCOs, OpEx, and CapEx. So the ability to actually capture that information and explain what your cost model is and recovery is critical to quality operations of service. And so it is important. Even though we turn a blind eye to it, I think as we go to Azure and cloud, FinOps and engineering and operations will have to be much more aware of costs, because there's really nowhere to hide when we go to Azure. It's green dollar OpEx out the door every month, every year. You will be scrutinized. So understanding TCOs is going to be an important skill, I think, moving into the future, even for technical resources. Right. The other thing is the inability to measure and quantify the impact of change. So I honestly see this as probably the biggest challenge for every organization, physical or virtual. Um, when we do projects, typically speaking, when you're starting up a new resource and you're baselining, what you're really doing is you're taking a snapshot in time. So, my design project, I go back to my design doc, and it says I can fit this many users on this piece of hardware, this cloud instance. Well, you can move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future, different builds of Windows 10, new tools, new security tools, new agents, things were introduced to your desktop. Is that original design document still valid? I would say probably not, right? And so those are kind of some of the risks I see, right? And I think you have a couple of choices in your approach. And really, I think it's three. I've listed two here, and first one, overspend, right? Overspend is an option, right? And if I had to choose one to be in out of these two, I hope I work in an environment where I'm able to overspend. Doesn't sound good to the finance and leadership teams, but as a technical or operations resource, I would much prefer to be in this situation, right? Good user experience for a longer period of time, right? You have more gear, less people. People are going to be happier for a longer period of time. But when you get scrutinized, your VDI cost, your per cost per user, it's going to be a lot higher probably than average, right? You're maintaining that good user experience, but there's a trade-off. It's costing you more, right? So is your VDI or XenApp strategy as good as doing a desktop or a laptop? maybe not. Maybe you're bloating that cost, so it's not cost competitive, right? Um, the one thing though, even if you do overspend, we still don't know what the impact of change is, right? So, impact of change is still an unknown, right? Really important, because you may overspend in the early days and you have a longer runway, but as change is introduced in your environment, right, you get closer and closer to that user experience wall and your maximum operational capacity. The second of the third choice is underspend. This is the one you don't want to be in. I've been in it. Your runway is very short from the day you start, rolling out your service. You have the potential to impact your users sooner. So user experience can degrade much quicker as change is introduced into your environment. Much riskier, right? Um, you know, Potentially unpredictable operations and support. And really, what I'm saying here is, my experience is when you're undersized and you've overloaded your environment, your operations and support teams end up on calls all the time trying to troubleshoot. Why am I having this experience? Why are we having performance problems? Why are my VMware consoles, whatever? Why is everything red? Why am I having performance issues? So the trade-off is you save money maybe up front and you haven't sized properly, and you may oversubscribe your service, but it all comes back to support, right? Poor user experience, and then your support teams are tied up putting out fires frequently, right? And that a lot of times what drives people to buy a DEX tool. Hey, I need a tool now. I need to understand the root cause analysis, like what's happening. Why are these users having a problem? A lot of times it may be because you're not sized properly, right? So you start to have these issues and you're looking for root cause with, even the native tools that come with the solutions. They're not telling you anything, right? But a lot of times it's a sizing issue, right? um, Cost fluctuation, right? So what I kind of mean here is my experience with environments where they underspend, they're crisis driven, right? So you're reacting to poor user experience, you're reacting to those operations and engineering teams being tied up on calls all the time, and what you're doing is you're reacting to those negative situations with spending. So instead of having a predictable, understandable rollout, you're reacting and rushing to get stuff in, buying hardware, whatever it is, get it on the floor as quick as you can, or expand your cloud service as quick as you can, to solve this critical problem. But again, the impact of change is still an unknown. So what does that really mean is, even though when you react to the initial situation, you expand your service, if you still don't understand what the impact of change is, as change is introduced in your environment, you may end up in the exact same scenario again. And that's a real challenge, right? And, you know, if I had to kind of look at what these two scenarios could look like over a 5-year period for a customer, I have kind of 6 columns here, and I refer to as like a customer that doesn't have a Microsoft 365 baseline. And when I say Microsoft 365, we're really talking about Windows 10, Windows 11, with Office 365 in a browser, right? That is your typical user. I know a lot of people refer to it as like knowledge worker, different types of personas, but I think the baseline persona, what we're all trying to understand is, what is the experience for a user with Microsoft 365, which is Office, a browser, and what is that experience like on my infrastructure or even physical devices, right? And you can see on my first column here, we're kind of showing, this is our capacity guidance that we have, come up with either with our vendor, partner, maybe it's through using blogs, some simple rules, things that we kind of talked about in the beginning, and we knew we could get 1,400 users, per cluster, let's say, right? Nice and clean. Don't have my operational run yet. We're not worried about that. This is just planning stages. We have nice clean capex and opex, right? We know what our opex yearly is, and it's a nice clean looking, opex per VDI capex, and then our total cost for that VDI. Obviously, there's tons of other costs that get layered into your stack, for all the agents and apps, but this is purely from an infrastructure perspective. It gives you a nice clean capex and opex, right? But as you can see, we're going to follow this kind of customer through this 5-year journey. So they've implemented it, which is great. And their current operational runs at around approximately 800. So they're running 800 VDIs, right, on this infrastructure. Now, The other thing is we can see we don't know what their user experience is. Seems to be good. It's subjective. Everybody's like, yeah, it seems pretty good, for now. And our total operational capacity, we're still referring back to our original design or our original hypothesis that we put in. I don't know what my remaining run capacity is. 600. If I point back to my original design document, is that real? I don't know. We're going to find out. Uh, you know, our remaining run capacity, really unknown. Our capex and opex, everything is still static. Those are the things that we paid for in the beginning. But to me, it's kind of an unknown because we still don't know what our total operational capacity is. So year two rolls around, new OS build. You're going from 1809 or 1909 to 21H2 something. Does that change your baseline? Do I know what the impact of my users? I'm going to say, it's really an unknown, right? I'm still running 800 users, but those users are now running, one or two builds into the future, right? So we really don't know, right? Um, the other thing is maybe introduce in year three a new video conferencing tool, right? So end user workspace, you have to rebaseline. But if you're not rebaselining, you're implementing a new conferencing tool. Maybe it's Teams, a new version of Teams, new version of Zoom, something along those lines, right? You've implemented into your environment. What's the impact? We don't know. I've seen bringing in a new telephony tool, you could lose 20, 30, 40%, right? If everybody's using it for video conferencing and different things like that. Maybe in year 4 and 5, new security tool. Maybe in year 5, it's a new Windows OS. I think the story's consistent across kind of what I'm saying is that change is a constant throughout this environment. And if you're not measuring the impact of that change, we really don't know what our capacity is during that period of time. You may not have predictable opex and capex, and user experience. We're going to hear from our customers, what that user experience is like, right? So why don't we jump over to the next slide? And this is what I look at as kind of the third choice. It's a measured spend, right? So the goal is really consistent user experience, stable operations and support, predictable cost. That's really important for a service, and the ability to maintain and keep a high quality user experience, right? Is that predictable cost, and really understand the impact of change. And so I'm going to jump over to the next slide. Same customer, same scenario again. The only thing different, what we did this time, we took something like Login Enterprise, and we've created a Microsoft 365 baseline, right? And then I also re-baseline every major change, right? So what we kind of see here, same customer, same vendor or advisor. I looked at the rules that have been provided about user to core ratio. However, I've come up with our strategy to buy this piece of hardware. Everything is exactly the same. One difference in the first year, before I deploy, what I'm actually doing is I'm baselining. I'm applying pressure to this infrastructure. I'm taking my unique desktop, my Windows, my Microsoft 365 baseline with my personas, my security tools, your stack, and I'm applying pressure to it on this infrastructure. So what does it tell? So the first difference we can see here, I kind of have a user experience score, right? So I'm kind of understanding, hey, there is a metric to user experience, and I've been able to kind of judge it ahead of time before we start rolling and scaling. So that's great. We kind of set a benchmark there, or a baseline. Unfortunately, a little disappointing is that I see, from what I was advised to what I actually got, I started at 1,400, but I'm at 1,000 now. I can only get 1,000 users on this infrastructure, based on my current operational capability. So a little disappointing because it was a nice clean number before. It was only going to cost me $893 a year. My costs have risen up, but the difference is I know for sure within a degree, right? 5-10% one way or the other, that I can fit 1,000 users on this infrastructure, and everybody's going to have a high quality experience. I'm still running at my 800 users, but what I'm starting to see now I'm able to measure how much of my remaining run capacity I have. I know how much percentage I have left. I have accurate TCOs and OPEX, right? Year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, all the same things are happening. I'm still rolling in a new OS. new video conferencing, right? Maybe it's Teams 2.0, Metaverse Edition, 3D glasses. I'm not sure what it is, but the key is that every time we're introducing these major changes into your build, into your unique stack, we're rebaselining and we're resetting our operational capabilities. We're resetting the user experience scores. I'm resetting my TCOs. And I'm actually seeing that over a period of time, in theory, and I think we all see this, is that your capacity will degrade, right? Your ability to provide, 1, 2, 3, 5-year-old hardware, you're going to lose, the capacity, how many people you can fit on there. Your costs may rise slightly. They may come down, depending, again, CapEx and OpEx, and depending if you're running in Azure. But the key is you're able to actually measure the difference, right? You know, um, the one thing I would say, and back to the beginning, the one thing I've seen, we've had scenarios where, compared to what we were originally told, to what we actually did a load test with our vendor, we had a 50% drop in capacity. So say I was told 1400. When we actually loaded our user and our desktops, we had a 50% drop. We've had customers with a 67% drop from their actual recommended, buy this hardware, load your personas on here, your Microsoft 365 baseline. They had a 67% drop. They actually pivoted completely different technologies because it just wasn't financially viable to go with that system and then have to spend triple the amount to get whole and to run at that same level. Right. So as you can kind of see over that period of time, with this measured approach, you're kind of every major change, you're actually able to baseline and understand what the impact is to your users and your budgets, your operations team. Um, and over time, you can start to trend, right? You can start to, once you start recording this data, once you start understanding what the impact is, you can understand what your average UX score is over the 5-year life, right? Your cost per VDI, you can start to track that fairly accurately. Your total operational capacity, you can start to map that out. Are you degrading? Are you increasing? With a new version of Windows or some change, some tweak in your operating system, are you making it better and optimize? Maybe you are, maybe it is getting more, but the key is that it's giving you this information for you to help make decisions about the service. When is it time to expand? When is it time to invest? Um, what hardware should I get? What cloud instance should I get? And it helps keep you ahead of the curve in terms of making decisions instead of reacting to negative feedback from customers, instead of reacting to emergency situations. You're kind of predicting what's going on. You're watching that end user experience and measuring the impact and investing forward instead of reacting backwards, right? And for me, I think honestly the key takeaway here, if I had to summarize them, in my experience, I kind of look at, like, there's really nothing more expensive than a poorly planned and implemented virtual end user workspace. It can impact you, your team, and your organization, right? Like, and hurt your individual reputation if you're involved in that service. And talking from experience, by the way, this is not a judgment or anything. I've been in experiences where I've been part of an environment that wasn't sized properly, and I had challenges, right, with it, and we worked through it and turned things around, and it was excellent. If you're a trusted advisor, consultant, or vendor that is providing guidance on resource host ratios, and you don't know your customer's unique EUC stack, it can impact as well, like your view as a trusted advisor, right? Because if I can tell you're going to get 1400 users on this desktop and I don't really know your stack, I've never measured it, and you get 50% less, it can really change your customer's perception, right? Of your advice or your guidance of how I can operate my environment, right? And so my key takeaways are really, optimize your unique workspaces. I think there's so many great community tools out there: Citrix Optimizer, VMware Optimizer, lots of great blogs and articles about how to optimize for your antivirus, different parts of your desktop. Worth of time and investment by your operations and engineering teams for sure. Baseline your infrastructure. If you're in a multi-family, maybe you have 3 or 4 different vendors on the floor. Maybe you have different processors, different memory storage. Every one of those has a different resource profile and a different operational capability. Baselining that infrastructure and measuring the experience, critical for success, in my opinion, right? Set your operational standards. Once you've baselined and understood what your Microsoft 365 baseline is, set those operational standards on those hosts and clusters or instances and stay within those operating parameters, right? By doing that, you're also creating accurate TCOs. Your OpEx and CapEx is accurate, right? It's reflective of actual users using that system, right? And then, if you're a login enterprise customer, proactively monitor those workspaces. Your system is going to fail. You're going to have a problem somewhere. Gateway, storefront, host cluster, DNS. Take your choice of the things in the service chain. Something will fail. Use the tool, proactively monitor, and look for those failures. Right? Accept that change is a constant. The EUC space is moving at a rapid pace, faster than I've ever experienced in my career. The last 5 years has been absolutely crazy. How much change is introduced in our environment. During COVID and stuff like that, and Teams, the rise of telephony and all that stuff is very disruptive, right, to the space. So once you've understood your Microsoft 365 baseline, and when significant change is introduced in your environment, rinse and repeat. Optimize your updated workspace. Maybe there's new guidance, new optimizations. Make sure you're constantly going back, tuning, right, and making sure that you're well optimized. Rebaseline your infrastructure, right? When you introduce something on your tool, you may actually have a serious impact, right, on your capacity. Make sure you go back and actually rebaseline. You may find adding a tool like Teams or Zoom, adding a new security tool, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, it could have a serious impact on your ability to operate your service. Make sure you're rebaselining and measure that new experience. Have you degraded past the point of users going to be impacted? Maybe those optimizations actually increase and improve the user experience. But it's better to know than not know and wait for people to call and complain, right? Reset your operational standards. Again, once you reset those operational standards, maybe those clusters, those instances have gone down in the number of users you can support. Maybe they've gone up. Either way, the key is make sure you reset those operational standards so you know what your TCOs are, your OpEx and your CapEx. And the last thing, again, proactively monitor that workspace, right? If you have the tool, hunt for failure, look for high availability, get granular, test all the different components within your infrastructure. And thank you. That's me today. That's my key takeaways, if I had any. If there's any questions or anything, you can post them in the chat. And if not, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or through Login VSI, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.